Hello and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Please sign up at my Patreon to get episodes earlier, bonuses, to have a say on future content, and to interact with me and other Warbirders directly. But mainly you'll have the satisfaction of helping keep this podcast going. You can also toss me a tip via PayPal at WOWB17, or even just drop me a review. Thank you for your support. Now on to the show. Hello, Warbirders. Longtime listeners know that in this podcast, I usually profile an individual World War II warbird from design to the prototype, operational history, and post-war life of the aircraft, if there is one. But from time to time, I like to break up that pattern by drilling down deeper to examine an element that might be generally taken for granted or misunderstood. It's been a minute since I did this type of episode, and when I looked back, I realized that I had started this Quest for Power series years ago and never continued. I think it's important to complete it, because except for my glider episode, every warbird has at least one engine, and just about every week I throw around engine-related terms as if everyone out there is a gearhead. Now, I know some of you are, but probably many of you know very little of what goes on under the hood, cowling. Classifying it all as CFM, complete flipping magic, to use the polite term. So I know it seems like I'm always saying to go back and listen to old episodes, but this time it's kind of important. I've even forgotten what was in the first two of this series, because I did them years ago. So you really should go back and listen to, or re-listen to, the Quest for Power 1, Cylinders, and Quest for Power 2, Superchargers and Turbo Superchargers. But if you can't look around for old episodes right now, here is the super quick recap. In the first one, I looked at how to get more power out of reciprocating piston engines by adding more and more cylinders, and arranging them in increasingly novel ways and in different shapes, such as V's, W's, X's, and H's. Gee, are we looking at engines or practicing our alphabet? We looked at how designers also arranged cylinders in circles, first in a rotary format where the cylinders themselves spun around, or later in radial engines where a circle of cylinders turns a crankshaft, and finally arranging these circles in multiple banks. Then, in the supercharger and turbo supercharger episode, I talked about using blowers of various kinds to push more air into the engine. Now, to finish this series, I'm releasing 3 mini episodes. This one on water and nitrous oxide injection. The next one is on superfuels. And the last one is on turbo compounding. So if you're supporting me on Patreon, you'll get them all at once. Otherwise, they'll be rationed out. So why not pop over to Patreon and join? I'd really appreciate the support, and you can get the lot all at once. Okay, so today we're going to talk about injecting methanol and water into the mix. It's something that we hear about in late war engines, and honestly, it's a strange concept to grasp. Maybe the methanol makes sense. It's alcohol, right? So it burns, right? So maybe the engine can get an increased kick by throwing some alcohol in there? Kind of like a party goer having a few shots of tequila to supercharge the evening? But before we get into all of that, we do need to talk about fuel-air mixtures. That's the red knob on your flight simulator quadrant, if you have one. So what is mixture and what does it do? Well, burning gasoline is a chemical reaction. And there is a perfect fuel-to-air ratio that will generate the most power. This ratio gets disrupted the moment the aircraft climbs away from the ground as the ambient or outside air pressure immediately begins to drop as you climb. Meaning that from the moment you leave the runway, too much fuel is going into the cylinder as compared to air. To describe this situation, we say that the mixture is rich. You might say that rich sounds good, but with an overly rich mixture, power actually is lost and fuel is wasted as this happens. Think of throwing too much wood on a campfire all at once. The fire is smothered. That's why piston engines have a mixture control to fine-tune this ratio. If the knob is pushed to the firewall, this fuel-air mixture is described as full rich, and as the pilot pulls it back, this process is called leaning the mixture. Eventually, the mixture is so lean that there is too little fuel to burn and the engine stops. This mixture is actually called cutoff, and it's how these types of engines are actually stopped when the flight is over. So, there is a perfect fuel-air mixture that generates the most power, and that is what the pilot is always trying to achieve with the mixture setting. So, a mixture that produces the best power burns hotter. That makes sense, right? With super and turbo supercharging, the high manifold pressures of the compressed air makes the ingoing fuel and air charge even hotter. But sometimes it gets so hot in the cylinder that the fuel spontaneously ignites early, before the spark plug fires, which is bad. This is known as pre-ignition or detonation. Now, these terms aren't exactly the same, but for the purposes of this episode, I'm using them as a synonym. And this can actually be heard as knocking or pinging. Instead of the smooth hum or roar of normal combustion, you'll hear what has been variously described as metallic pinging or a tapping sound, almost like someone shaking a tin can full of marbles, or a hammering knock deep inside the engine. It may sound bad, but its main problem is that pre-ignition makes the engine run rough and robs power. So here's where things get really counterintuitive, so bear with me. A richer mixture actually helps cool the engine. Yes, you heard that right. More fuel in leads to a cooler burn. How? So, vaporizing the liquid fuel going in absorbs some heat, and it helps cool the engine. But this overly rich mixture isn't the best ratio for power. What to do? The answer was to spray something else in there to help cool the cylinders. And that something else was water. Like I said before, when I first heard of water methanol injection systems that were used to get an extra boost of power, I figured that it was the methanol that was adding the power. But no, in the 50-50 mix of alcohol and water, it was the water that was cooling the cylinders so that the mixture could be run at its absolute max power hottest, and the alcohol was mainly there as an antifreeze. In testing, it was found that when water injection was in use, the engine was markedly smoother. And as a bonus, the interior of the combustion chambers also stayed extremely clean with no carbon or varnish buildup. Due to the limited amount of water that could be brought along, this extra burst of energy was only used for takeoff and for WEP or War Emergency Power combat situations. Time limits on these kinds of systems were limited to about 2 10-minute bursts of power. But the extra spurt of power was significant. For example, with the Grumman F6F Hellcat, the climb performance could be increased by almost 700 feet per minute and 20 miles per hour in level speed. So what other Allied aircraft were equipped with these water injection systems? Later models of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, F-4U 1D Corsair, the aforementioned F6F Hellcat and the Hawker Tempest Mark V could all be equipped. The Soviet Klimov VK-107B and later could also be equipped with water injection, and these engines were used to power the MiG-7, PE-2, the Yak-3, and Yak-9. Okay, well, what about Axis aircraft? The Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate fighter, known to the Allies as the Frank, was equipped with an HA-45 Homare engine that used water injection to aid the supercharger in giving the Frank a rated 2,000 horsepower at takeoff, and giving it the performance that rivaled the Allied fighters of the time. The German version of this type of system was known as MW50 for Methanol Wasser 50 and was installed in the Focke-Wulf FW190, D and later variants, and Messerschmitt Bf109G series and later. Another system that was used by the Germans, but not by the Allies, was the GM1, or Gearing Mischung 1 system for injecting nitrous oxide into the engine. In this case, although there is still a cooling effect, as you are spraying cold liquid nitrous oxide directly into the supercharger intake, the main effect was the ability to increase the amount of fuel being burnt at high altitude by increasing the amount of oxygen in the fuel-air charge. How? When nitrous oxide was injected into the intake and heated in the combustion chamber, it decomposed into nitrogen and oxygen, with that extra oxygen allowing for more complete fuel combustion. This allowed pilots to burn more fuel than would otherwise be possible at altitude, significantly increasing horsepower by about 400 to 500 at high altitude. However, the system was heavy, consumed quickly, and again was only useful in bursts, which meant that it was mainly deployed in high-altitude interceptors rather than frontline fighters. While it offered impressive performance advantages, it also strained engines, shortening their lifespan. The Focke-Wulf TA-152H, which was an updated version of the FW-190, had been developed as a dedicated high-altitude interceptor, and so was equipped with both the GM1 nitrous oxide systems as well as the MW50 water injection system. It was only produced in very limited numbers. Kurt Tank, the designer of the 190 and 152, himself credited these systems with saving his own life. In late 1944, while he was flying an unarmed TA-152H to get to a meeting, he was jumped by two P-51 Mustangs. By applying full power and engaging both boosting systems, he got away until the Mustangs were no more than 2 dots on the horizon. So I hope that I've cleared up the mysteries of water and nitrous oxide injection. Do you like these deep dive looks at the tech of warbirds, or is this boring, too detailed stuff? It's hard for me to judge, because I'm almost always wondering, how it works. Let me know in the comments if you appreciate this stuff, and if you do, what other topics could be covered. As I said at the start, I haven't done many lately, but if there is more demand, then I'm more likely to do more. Or do you just want to tell me, just cover the individual warbirds, Brian, and are you ever going to get to the P-51? So if you're a Patreon supporter, you'll be able to roll right into the next one on super fuels. And thank you for your support. Otherwise, you'll have to wait a little bit. Until next time.